the front page of Drudge. Let's give you the headlines. Newt flashback 1983. Reagan responsible for national decay. This is Newt saying these things. Newt 1986. The Reagan administration has failed, is failing. Newt 1988. If Bush runs as a continuation of Reaganism, he will lose. But this is a long list of people here who have just come out both barrels blazing on the same day or within close proximity to the same day. Elliot Abrams, Bob Tyrrell, Drudge, Britt Hume, Fox News, Dr. Krauthammer, the New York Sun, the National Review, Vin Weber. And I'll tell you what, the way this hit me, I've told you people this before, I first heard of Newt Gingrich when he was perhaps the premier defender of Ronald Reagan. What happened was, the moment Reagan's inaugurated, the Democrats, the media, it was as vicious an assault on a human being, on a Republican, as there is today. Now, those of you who were not paying attention back then or who were too young to pay attention, don't doubt me, it was vicious. And Reagan did not have a media on his side. There was the three networks and CNN and the newspapers. There was no talk radio. There were no blogs, of course. There wasn't the internet. There was no alternative media. Reagan had National Review. That was his lone ally in the media, William Buckley's National Review. That was it. And early on in the Reagan years, does the name David Stockman ring a bell? David Stockman, the first budget director for Reagan, within the first year, goes rogue and says Reaganomics won't work, can't work. It was bad. It was a total backstab. The whole premise, that's where the name supplier trickle down actually got created, I think, for the most, and became standard vernacular in the popular lexicon. That and supply side. And I remember the stories about Reagan taking Stockman to the woodshed. That's a quote from the stories. That's how it was described, so he got his mind right. But that unleashed a torrent from Tip O'Neill, from every Democrat. I mean, all these people. Reagan lied. Bush was right. It is voodoo economics. Oh, this is horrible. Remember the Great Recession at the time here? The Democrats love what Stockman did, and the guy who self-appointed himself to stop all this was Newt. And that's where I first heard of him. Newt Gingrich and Bob Walker and a couple of others that were members of what was called the Conservative Opportunity Society. I don't know that it had been named as such yet, but it was a bunch of young, relatively new members of the House on the Republican side who were conservatives. They had special orders every night once the House had finished its official business. As long as somebody shows up on the floor of the House to speak, the cameras on C-SPAN stay on. It didn't matter that nobody else was in the House chamber. They stayed on until the last person left the floor. And Newt and his guys were in there 5 hours a night. And they were rotating. Each of them would speak for an hour. They would yield to each other. They would interrupt themselves for questions and so forth. But the cameras only were focused on the well. You never knew that there was no audience there, except there was never any applause. You never knew that the House chamber was empty, unless you knew what special orders were. And this went on for years. And it's where I heard of Newt Gingrich. And Newt had appointed himself the personal defender of Ronald Reagan and had appointed himself the singular person with his buddies to counter all of what he thought were the lies of the day being spouted by the media and the Democrats. These special orders went on for years, and it wasn't just the defense of Reagan. Newt Gingrich was ripping the Speaker of the House, the time Tip O'Neill, and when Tip left and Fort Worth Jim Wright came in, the assault continued. It was everything you wish was happening today, is all I can tell you. It was everything you wish the entire Republican Party was doing today. And it was led by Newt Gingrich. And what was he doing? He was defending Reagan. Now, all of this stuff that hit Drudge and everywhere else last night about Newt telling everybody the country goes to hell if they continue Reaganism, and that Newt insulted Reagan, and that the Reagan administration had failed, Iran controversy. I never heard any of that. So this is obviously a coordinated attack that's designed to take Newt out here in Florida. That's what's going on. It's happening. Now you've got Nancy Reagan. People have produced, I think, either a letter or video from Nancy Reagan saying that Newt would be the obvious inheritor of Reaganism. And you've got Michael Reagan, Ronald Reagan's son, who's endorsed Newt. Nancy Reagan, 1995, Goldwater Institute, after the Reagan era. And Jeff Lord said, believe me, Nancy Reagan thought for a nanosecond that Newt was anti-Reagan. She would never have been on the same platform with him. And I can vouch for I've never seen a more protective wife of anybody, Nancy Reagan. You, in your life, you said one thing against Ronald Reagan, you were gone. You were banished. You were never allowed to be in the same room. I mean, it was, talk to the people who knew them both and worked with them, and they'll confirm that. And so Jeff Lord says, well, now, if all this that we're hearing yesterday is true, what the hell's Nancy Reagan doing out there giving Newt basically a huge award? She said the dramatic movement of 1995, what was going on then, is an outgrowth of a much earlier crusade that goes back half a century. Barry Goldwater handed the torch to Ronnie, her husband, and in turn, Ronnie turned the torch over to Newt and the Republican members of Congress to keep that dream alive. That's Nancy Reagan, 1995. Now, Jeff Lord worked in the Reagan White House. Question is, whoever's doing this, do you think they have the guts to do this against Obama? That's the real question. You do? Have you seen any evidence of this? Have you seen any evidence the Republican Party is willing to go after Obama like they're going after each other? I haven't. I hope to heck that I hope that Elliott Abrams and Bob Tyrrell and the rest of them will have just as much fire against Obama as they do Newt. I hope that we see this same kind of focused opposition to Obama once that day comes.